Welcome to the Max Bet Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything gaming. I'm Landon Jones, here with Mike McKiskey. Let's get started.
And we're live. What's up, buddy? How are you?
I like how you changed the intro there. We are live.
You were shredding me. You were shredding me every time I do. You're like, you say the same thing every time. I'm like,
it's all right.
Just saying hi, bud. Just saying
the
hi.
People don't know. But hey, welcome to sunny San Diego, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of folks this week, cruising around and walking some slot floors with you and seeing the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
In the meantime, small construction project in the hotel room to get set up for this here.
So Mike texts me this morning. He goes, "I wonder if the hotels will ever notice that I stapled this green screen to their wall. If they notice the big holes in the wall after I leave."
I don't know. Yeah, I'll send a photo to you so you can see it. But like, that's the only way to do it. Like the pop-up ones aren't as effective and they're heavy. So you I got a sheet that's green, but then I'm going, I have clips. It comes with like a really heavy duty clips to like clip it to a pole, but then there's no poles in here. Right. So I'm like, and then the curtain, like the curtains are on sliders. So there's really nothing, way to clip it. So yeah, I just brought my staple gun and banged it into the wall. And then, I mean, you were not going to see it. It's 8 feet in the air. Like, I mean, you'd have to really be looking for it, but
I would just love if the not turn down service, but one of the maids walks into the room as you're doing this thing, and they just see the green screens, lights, and cameras, and they're like, "What is going on in this room?" She's just
immediately turning around and running away. She's like, "That is not being serviced until he's gone."
If you were a maid and walked into a hotel room and saw lights, a camera, and a green screen, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I know what comes to mind. And this is not what's happening in this room.
Podcast.
Yeah, this is not. Yeah, that's not what we're doing. But yeah, I laugh. So, but the good news is right now, given all the restrictions, they won't service your like when you check in, they're like, "We're not going in your room until you leave." Like unless you specifically call. So, good news is you don't even need the privacy sign. They're just going to leave you alone anyway.
Yeah, you're already out of the hotel room when they notice the big holes in the wall.
Yeah, they're like, "Well, that was there before. Don't worry about it." Yeah, man, but that's how my morning's going. But you have an interesting resolution. I know a lot of people have been intrigued by the story where I don't even know, but you were sitting in your hot tub in the building. A gentleman joined you. You guys had a good time.
This sounds so weird. This is not how the story rolls out, but I did meet a guy in a hot tub who owns art galleries.
Net, you had a Picasso in your house for like 3 months.
Yeah, it was like 6 months. I had a Jean Basquiat. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't roll in these like fancy social circles. And I had a Picasso. And so yesterday, if you're following my move, which if you're not, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
But I am moving back to Vegas. So I had to go return these fancy art pieces.
Bye-bye, Picasso.
And so he asked me, and they're his personal pieces. He asked me to meet him at his art gallery in La Jolla. It's Arjang's Art Gallery in La Jolla. If you're there, check it out. Dude's awesome. And so the responsible thing was, this guy was really nice. I brought him a nice bottle of wine and he was so taken back and just thankful. And he goes, "Come here, I have a gift for you." And I go, "I don't need a gift. Like, thank you for, lending me the Picasso." Right. That was weird.
That was the gift. Yeah.
That was awesome. Nice talking point. And he goes, "Who's your favorite artist?" And I said, I like Jackson Pollock. That's just kind of my style. And that's probably the only artist I know other than Picasso.
On the spot. Yeah. I wouldn't even know what to say.
So he's like, "Oh, Jackson Pollock, come here." So he gives me a Jackson Pollock. It's a numbered printed version of the Jackson Pollock, stamped with the Jackson Pollock, verified. But I have a Jackson Pollock now that he gave me, which to me is priceless. And it is, it's just, wow. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what a crazy life you live, my friend. Like you're going, here's a guy just shows up with the Picasso. That's weird. And then no, that doesn't happen to anybody else. And then you go to give it back. You do a nice thing. Here's a bottle of wine. Bang. Now you're the new owner of a limited edition.
Yeah. And the original sold for I think it was like 300 million, something stupid. It's insane how much money people have to spend on art. Like, who has $300 million anyways? And if you did,
right,
why are you buying a piece of paint?
Well, yeah,
I know
because
everybody's going to hate me for saying that.
I listen, I would like to
Yeah.
believe most people listening to this are in our boat where we don't have 300 million. I mean, I'm not even convinced there's a $3,000 painting. I'm going, okay, like maybe like at that point, but I'm sitting there going, that's probably as much as it would be. But yeah, think about how much money you must have if you're spending 300 million just on a painting. Like how much is the house worth where the painting's going? Like, you know what I mean? You start thinking about that, you go, wow, the painting costs more than the house.
You could send 20,000 kids to college.
Yeah.
Probably more than that. I'm not good at math.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do it on the fly either, but yeah, so free tuition for a small village or a painting to look at. But either way, congrats on your new piece of art. So looking forward to checking that one out.
Thanks. It's going in the new Max Bet studio in Vegas. So
bang, give it about 30 days. We'll be live and direct.
So if you're looking to rob us,
yeah, we're not giving you the address, but maybe you'll piece it together from the window view. But yeah, man. So that's exciting. Congrats on being a little bougier than you were yesterday.
Thank you, sir.
Do you look at it and feel inspired?
Haven't hung it up yet. So currently it's sitting on the floor. I'm hoping my dog doesn't chew it.
It's like the guy's gonna look.
Moving.
He's gonna say, "Hey, send me a picture." You're gonna be like, "Don't just ignore that extra stain. That's from my dog. He did."
But if you're watching this, I'll put the picture up here of the painting.
Yeah, nice.
If you're watching YouTube, and if you are, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. If you're listening on the podcast store or in the podcast store, you can also watch us on YouTube at MaxBet Media in YouTube. So we appreciate your guys' support in any way, shape, or form. And speaking of support, you want to give the old breakdown for our guys?
Yeah, this week we're talking about our good friends over at Gaming Analytics. So they it's just really cool, right? Like I laugh because everywhere you turn now, like you read geeky articles, you're going AI and the data, and talking to our guest who we'll get to here in a second, she was talking about the power of data and how it affects kind of what she does in the world of esports and some of her research. And it's like we're getting to a point now where there will be so much data generated that guys, I don't care how smart you are, the smartest kid in the smartest school in the world isn't going to analyze it all fast enough. Like it's just not right. You need the machine learning, you need the algorithms, and that's true in gaming as much as it is in medical science and anywhere else. So our friends at Gaming Analytics have solved that problem or are on their way to solving that problem with what they're doing and their artificial intelligence, kind of casino analytics and some of their marketing stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how crazy it is to hear, hey, we knew this guy was going to leave and we offered him and then we talked to him and he was like, I was getting kind of tired of the casino, but now I'm staying, right? It's like, what? Like they were able to flag the person who was leaving before they left and keep him there. So, I mean, they're go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say my favorite part, and I keep reverting back to this description because when we got the demo, anyone can use it. I mean, even me that has no idea how, analytic programs work in a casino, but it's the Google search of analytics, right? So anything that you think about, you just type it in the search bar, which is at the top, and it'll auto-populate what your question is. So super fascinating, super simple to use. If you guys want a demo, we were more than happy to help set that up. It costs you nothing. It's free for your time. And that's where the world is going is AI. And why not use a program that can help benefit your property?
Yeah. And if nothing else, it's just the power of learning. So even if you go, I'm not putting it in, at least now you know what's out there because it's coming, right? I think it's probably one of those things where in a couple of years, you'll see it. It'll go from guys like Kieran and Gaming Analytics who are doing it on the side, not on the side, that's their main business, but I mean, they're smaller companies, right? Doing it to where all of a sudden you're going to start seeing, well, the big systems providers are either building it themselves or acquiring these guys. And it's just going to be part of the deal, right? It's going to be
and it's not that expensive. He's actually super reasonable. I that was the big shock to me is how cheap it is.
It costs way less than a Jackson Pollock. I'll tell you that much for free. Yeah. So that's, that's good. So anyway, if you're interested in that, gaminganalytics.ai, go give them a shout. Check them out. And like Landon said, if you want us to help you connect with them, we'll do it for you. So all good.
Super pumped about today's interview.
You should be. You're the one that we did this because of your interest and continued pursuit of esports. Yes. I'm not mad at you.
Esports, guys. Right, esports. Yeah. If you don't know anything about esports, this is the podcast you want to listen to because it's the fastest growing segment, in my opinion, in the sports section, right? For either sports betting and it will be introduced, and it already is, and we're going to learn more about that But yeah, super pumped. So esports today, guys, get prepared.
No doubt. And
pumped up.
so with us today, we have Dr. Brett Abarbanel. So she focuses on esports research and video games and kind of the cross between video games and gambling. So we love that whole concept. And then she's working at the UNLV International Gaming Institute. So we're Rebel Pod, and we love that.
Yep.
So we're stoked to have her join us. And what do you think, man? Should we just send it over?
Well, yeah, I was happy that you pronounced her last name because I was hoping that you did, because I was trying to pronounce it and I didn't want to slaughter it for the world to hear. So let's rock and roll.
Let's get it.
Let's pump it up.
Boom. All right, Brett, welcome to MaxBet Podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I should put some respect on your name. It's actually Dr. Brett Abarbanel. So for anyone looking it up at home. So how's it feel walking around as a doctor? I feel like I'm supposed to concur with everything you say. Is that true? Or?
Oh, well, you've seen a lot of Leonardo DiCaprio and Catch Me If You Can, right?
That's it.
I would say that I only make people call me doctor if they've really annoyed me. It's good to have a title. It confers a certain amount of respect, but in the end, it's, we're normal people too. I like to think.
Yeah, no, hopefully. Well, that's for sure. So
I wish I was smart enough to get a doctor, because my last name is Jones, so it'd be Dr. Jones. But I never made it.
You call him Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones.
That's it.
I never made it.
I've seen the spelling on some of your emails. You are a long way away, my friend. Maybe you could be a math doctor where it's all just numbers. That could be
That's
interesting.
true. That's
you have
true.
to write as many words,
or even a medical doctor. If nobody can read your handwriting, then no one knows if you're spelling things incorrectly.
Perfect. And who knows what drug's going to show up at your house? You just like scribble it out. Go, I don't know. That's the part. We're way off track, but like that's the part that I always laugh is like you can't read the prescription yourself, but somehow when you get to the pharmacy, they're like, I know exactly what this is. And it's like, how? It's not, it's like looks like somebody drew a monkey going down a water slide, and yet here we are at the right dosage and everything else. But
real quick, this is funny before we get started, and you can put this in or not, but one of my professors at UNLV, I was doing this transfer that had to get approved. And so he's writing the email with these massive words, just crazy big words. And I'm like, why are you making it so difficult to understand? He goes, because the person reading it, if they don't understand it, they don't want to question it because they don't want to sound dumb. So they'll just approve it. And I go, amazing. And it got approved.
Wow. Really? I'm going to remember that for next time I need to make a request for some sort of transfer for a student.
Yeah, I was going to say, so is that hold? Is that thesis you've seen in action on your end as well when you're dealing with other doctors and smart folks?
No, I mean, sometimes you'll definitely get PhDs who want to tell you how much they know, and they'll do everything in their power to make sure they tell you. But not really overall. I mean, it's not like, I don't know. Did you guys watch Friends?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Joey writes the letter of recommendation for Monica and Chandler to adopt a kid, and then he uses a thesaurus on every single word. And so at the end, it's like, sincerely, baby kangaroo Tribbiani. Like that. Exactly. Sometimes I wonder if people are doing things like that in emails, but I don't think no, that's not really. The people you want to be around are the people you want to be around. It doesn't really matter what field you're in.
That's right. It's like, just take a breath and say it how you would say it to my face. Like, what is this? I don't even know that there's a 14-letter word in here. There's no chance we're saying that on a regular basis.
Well, welcome back to esports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So right off the hop, I just want to say thanks for accepting the challenge. So your colleague, Jennifer Shatley, recommended or challenged you to come on and chat with us. And it sounded like you didn't really skip a beat. You're like, we're in, or you're in to do it with us. So
she gave me a huge sales pitch. How great you guys are. You pay me $1 million when we're done. Good to go.
Yeah, good. That's coming out of the Bo's budget at the UNLV Institute. Otherwise we're good there.
Crud, I'm getting nothing then.
Yeah, exactly. Do it for love, not So, but okay. So speaking of that, though, so you are working at the UNLV International Gaming Institute with our friend Bo and Jennifer, and you're focused on esports research. Am I characterizing that right? I mean, esports, how I think of it, I'm sure it's broader than that, but maybe give us a sense of like what is your focus area over at the Gaming Institute?
Sure. So at IGI, I'm the director of research, and I also have my own specific areas of interest. That's sort of what you do when you're a professor. It's one of the nice things you get to do is you get to pick the area that you want to work in. And
Sure.
I do my research and education work in video games, gambling, and esports, and sort of the crossover that exists within there. And sometimes it tends to veer more into one than the other, but for the most part, it's that nexus of the three that I do work in. So that's everything from primary data collection and writing academic papers to giving talks on the subject to talking about what gambling even is. And if we go too far beyond these descriptions, is every single thing in our lives gambling?
Right.
Narrowing that down to what exactly is it if we think about what exists under the law. So it's a pretty broad area that I work in pretty much. And in the end at IGI, it's anything that falls underneath the gambling umbrella is usually something we're working on. And then video games, esports, and gambling is my main area.
You're also a video gamer yourself, is that correct?
I am, yes, though it's just gamer. You don't have to say
Okay.
video gamer. It's like a holistic term, really. If you want the community to not write mean comments on YouTube like, haha, video gamer.
They're not confusing us with
comments welcome.
Like, yeah. They're like, dude, we're not playing Settlers of Catan here, dude. It's always only video. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that actually, because when you use that really general term of gamer, it really does include all of it, right? It's not just, me playing a video game in the morning while I drink my coffee. It's also people who play Warhammer or people who are LARPing or live action role playing right over at the park. I mean, gamer is really a pretty inclusive term.
That's awesome. Cool. I immediately have Paul Rudd moments now when you say LARP of just thinking about going to the park and dressing up.
Such a great movie moment.
So it sounds a little bit like for us, I grew up playing video games, not as much like Halo and these like online. I mean, we didn't have online games back, when I was growing up, but it was like Mario and just in your house doing that. Like, so dream job feels like, hey, now you get to study and play and research video games. So was that just the evolution? You're going, hey, I loved games as a kid. Now I'm going to do it now that I'm an adult. Or how did you make the jump into this career?
It's funny. It's almost like you and I did this on our career and life trajectories, because when I was a kid, I almost never played video games. I know what they were. Everybody talked about them at school, right?
Sure.
It's like cool kids had the Nintendo or the NES. And I just didn't really play. I was total outdoor kid. My parents were very much in favor of that. I played sports all growing up. I didn't really start to play video games other than occasionally at a friend's house until probably high school. I did the very traditional female teenager soccer thing, and I tore my ACL. And so that put me out of commission for a little while.
So you had to do something while your knees
from there, I had to find something to do, right? I could only watch so much TV and movies before it was enough screen time that I didn't even need my parents to tell me to stop sitting in front of the screen. I could figure it out on my own. I wanted to be outside and running around, like scrapes all up and down my knees. I mean, I was a messy kid. And but then I just, I started working on different things. I had friends who would set up LAN parties in their mom's basement, literally like the stereotype. People would carry those huge monitors, not like our cool thin screens today, but like the huge things that now you see them in older TV shows and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I'd lug those over.
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating, this esports section, right, in gaming, and people that are listening to pay attention, and because it's going to be a huge part of our business as we go forward. Everyone's so focused on just sports betting, but a lot of people are missing the mark on esports as well. Can you talk a little bit about how big that industry is and how much it's growing?
So first of all, I mean, I would even disagree when you say it's going to be one of the big things in this industry, because I think it already is.
Right.
And it's just a matter of whether or not people are one, taking advantage of it, and then two, designing a product and general service plan around it that is sustainable. And so right now, esports more generally, not just esports as it might relate to the gambling world, esports is huge. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's been exploding on this competitive entertainment scene for well over a decade. I mean, you could even go back a few decades if you really want to some of the early Atari games. I mean, we talk about King of Kong and how people used to compete to get the high score in Donkey Kong. And, you track yourself and record yourself on some weird fuzzy video with VHS. And that was how we used to do it. But now this is a totally digital world. And so you're able to compete. I mean, all you really need is the right equipment and a stable internet connection, and you can compete from almost anywhere. We still have lots of in-person events, and obviously those were sort of put on hold during COVID, and now we're starting to see more and more come out. But this is, I mean, you can think of it as a rapidly growing arm of the sports realm. You can think of it as its own universe, which in many ways it is.
Right.
But it really bears all of these hallmarks of what you'll see in traditional major sports leagues with when you think about live events. So things like ticket sales and event organization, commentary, merchandising, media sales. I mean, this is really, for simplicity's sake, I'll just call it a sport, even though there's a total debate around this, which is really, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. There's over 600 million esports fans worldwide. If you look more generally at video games, over 3 billion people play video games. That's like half the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing would probably be soccer, right? I almost said football, then I remembered we're American.
That's okay. Yeah.
And so that's, it's global reach in that manner. And a big part of that is just how well we connect. So what used to be, videotaping yourself with a huge camcorder to be able to show your high Donkey Kong score, now it's like nonstop, immediate interaction with others all over the world. So for example, in the morning, this is almost every single morning of my life now, I go downstairs, I make a cup of coffee, and then I sit down, and the first 20 minutes of my day are drinking coffee and playing a game of Hearthstone Battlegrounds. This is usually somewhere between 6 to 7:30 in the morning, depending on how late I feel like sleeping in.
Yeah.
And around that time of day, there's not a lot of other North American players really playing. I mean, the West Coast hasn't really gotten up yet, and the East Coast is probably, deep into work at that point.
Yep.
Probably. So I'm usually playing people whose names are in languages that aren't English. I play a ton with people whose languages or names are in the Korean alphabet. I play a ton with people whose names are in Russian alphabet. I mean, it's really a global thing. I'm playing with people all over the world, and it's immediate. So that has really allowed this competitive video gaming vertical to just shoot up. And it really has, especially during COVID. This was a time when we all first sports shut down. We didn't know how this was spread. We didn't know what was going on. And so it was, I mean, I think there's a documentary now on, I don't know, Netflix or one of those other, the day sports shut down. It sound like the end of the world this doomsday type thing, right? But it did. There was like this one week and suddenly the world is shutting down. Whereas with esports, because this is done so much digitally and we're already social distancing. I mean, look at the three of us here. We could be playing video games right now. It would be almost the same thing as connecting for a Zoom call for a podcast.
Nice.
And the ability to do that really helped esports grow in a major way during a pandemic. And right now we're looking at a market that's estimated to be about 1.6 billion.
Wow.
About 80% of that is advertising and sponsorship. So that's really where a lot of the money is coming in right now.
Yeah. And so like, I guess, and listening to you, I never really thought about the house to house or, I don't know if that's still considered peer-to-peer style gambling or gaming, because when I thought of esports, I would see these hype clips, like you have speakers at conferences going, there's 40,000 people in the stadium and these guys are walking in like prize fighters sitting in the chair. And then they're going to go do, I don't know, all the League of Legends, right? They're going to go shoot each other. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then when you say 600 million, so I'm assuming a lot of it is people like around the world tuning in, like almost like the Super Bowl. So these guys are fighting it out in a stadium with a limited capacity, but then around the world, people are like, I want to watch that too. So they could be in Russia or Korea or wherever.
It's international. So you can really pull in viewers from everywhere. And because a lot of this from the get-go has been streamed live online on a global scale, media rights has been a really interesting discussion in the piece, because if I started with having my event that was accessible to everybody, let's say I streamed on Twitch, which is a huge video game streaming platform among other games. And so people are used to seeing this from all over the globe. I can say, all right, well, I had 20 million unique viewers for this event. I literally, Brett Abarbanel couldn't, because I'm not that popular, though maybe one day. But that's the sort of viewership that we're talking about with these sorts of things. And it really has made this incredibly durable industry, because there's almost always going to be an audience out there. And when we talk about more localized events. You mentioned, a stadium filled with 40,000 people, and it's funny to think, oh, only 40,000, right? Like we're getting 2 million viewers elsewhere. But for example, in 2015, the League of Legends, which is one of the biggest video games, biggest esports too in the world, they announced that they were going to change where they held their world championship. Previously, it had largely been held in Asia, almost exclusively in China. And they announced that they were going to move it to the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Germany. And I think the arena might have a new name now, but
it's the League of Legends Arena.
And people were livid because this arena only held, I think it was like 20 to 30,000 people instead of previously, like they could fill the bird's nest, right? Remember that thing from the 2008 Olympics that went up? I mean, it's a huge, huge event. So suddenly we're going from spaces that could hold maybe 80,000 to one that only, and so people were livid. These seats sold out within minutes. Sure. I mean, this is the kind of thing where you actually have to be mindful of how big the space is with major events, because you can and in many ways will fill it. And that's with major events. I want to make sure I'm not claiming that every single event will fill every single space. And Mandalay Bay Event Center is going to be stuffed full of people if you bring in Brett and Landon and Mike to start playing something. Right? Nobody wants to watch us.
That's okay. Well, believe me,
for sure.
Listen,
Other than this podcast.
To put it in our terms, I've been to a few Charger games. They're definitely not selling out the stadium. So it's clearly some folks will and some folks won't. But
the Chargers are on my blacklist though. So people like me who are San Diegans, we're not showing up.
That's right. But again, the game goes on. It was interesting. So you talk about the perspective globally, and I think one thing we talked about previously before today, you had mentioned something where you say it's driven largely by advertising. So there's a huge amount of corporate investment or corporate, spend in the space. And you said something like Pringles spends almost as much on esports as it does like on soccer, which is their number one global. Is that right? Like it's
so there's a guy from Kellogg's who gave a talk the other week, and he was talking about how their number one advertising spend is soccer, right? This is the big global thing.
Every continent,
The number two is esports.
Wow.
So going back, I think it was 3 years ago, Seth Shore, who's into the esports business, and he was on our podcast, but he was talking about creating teams. So we talk about the Chargers right now. Is there ever a time that like Las Vegas is going to have an esports team that plays Call of Duty, we'll call it, right? And they go compete with a team in LA, and we're able to place bets on what teams we think will win. Do you ever see a path to that happening?
So that in many ways it already exists.
Okay.
So largely what has happened as esports started to evolve. So going back more than 3 years now, as esports started to evolve, teams did come together. You saw organizations start to bring players under their wings. Maybe it was an entire League of Legends team. Maybe it was a single Hearthstone streamer or a single StarCraft streamer who would be part of this team. And these teams, again, they were global, right? So I'm going to use one of the biggest teams as an example. Team Liquid is a huge global organization, and they have whatever you want to call them, players, athletes.
Sure.
They have competitors who are in their team organization. And this is the way a lot of the early phases of teams grew, is that they would be anywhere around the world. Blizzard, or Activision Blizzard, which is a major games manufacturer, when they created the game Overwatch a few years ago, they decided that when they were building it, they were specifically building it to be an esport. So pause for a second here. Not all games are created to be esports. Often a game is just created to be a game, but often within many of these games, there's a competitive element. And when we have a competitive element, where human beings like to watch competition, and so we get to see an esport maybe evolve out of that. So League of Legends, for example, wasn't originally created as an esport, but it became a huge one. Overwatch is a first-person shooter game. So you have teams that play against one another with a goal to achieve by the end of the game. And this was specifically oriented toward esports. So from the get-go, they created OWL, or the Overwatch League. And Overwatch League is really interesting because it was built differently. Unlike what we'd sort of seen before, where, for example, the League of Legends Championship Series has teams that it will select, it will sell the spots in the league to these different teams. Overwatch League was really built to be similar to kind of the franchise model that you see in like NFL, MLB. And so the teams that are in Overwatch League have cities associated with them.
Wow.
So there's the Philadelphia team, there's the Seoul team, there's the London team. They're from all over.
Sure.
And they then, what they were trying to do was build up kind of a localized support for different teams. What ended up happening, this is one of my favorite merchandising stories, is that when they gave the teams the names, right? Like, so there's the Fire, and then there's, in China, the team is the Dragons. This is, of course, the lucky image. But everybody wanted the Dragons merchandise because it was so much cooler than everything else. And so those sold out super quickly, and they weren't selling at the same numbers for any of the other teams. So even if people weren't like super supportive of this team, and they were still buying all the merchandise.
Looks cool, yeah.
And then it just went into overdrive because in the first year, this team was horrible and went like 0-13 or something like that before winning a game. And
people are placing bets, right? People are
losers.
placing bets on these
Yeah,
teams.
so
And do you do that through like a DraftKings, or is that mostly in Europe, or how does that?
So it depends. So this is one of the big ways that esports is paralleling sports, which is in event type wagering. So depending where you are, you can place bets on esports events. It varies where you are in the United States. It varies where you are around the world. In some places, it will be really similar to whatever the local sports betting laws are. So if there's a major event and a book is willing to take a bet on it, then it will offer odds and you can place that bet. So depending on the event, I mean, you may see an event up on DraftKings to pick a winner, or maybe there are some limited prop bets that might be available through that. But like most of these things, if you dig enough on the internet, you're going to find a huge array of different offerings. I know, for example, Pinnacle took their first bet on esports 11 years ago. It was 2010 when they took their first bet on esports. Yeah.
Jeez,
and they've built up really an e-sports book in many ways. They early on recognized that this is, in many ways, it's a totally different clientele. There's crossover like there is in any sort of wagering, but they actually started building a dedicated esports book to provide a product that was unique for that consumer. And that's something that I think a lot of other books are now sort of starting to recognize. Some of them, you don't have to put the effort in, right? It is what it is.
That's wild.
But so some offer these things as one element on the drop-down menu on a website. Some of them offer specific individual events. So like in Nevada, for example, esports is currently treated as event wagering. So similar to the Olympics for each individual event.
Interesting.
In esports, at least, you have to apply to take wagers on it.
I didn't even know you could place bets on the Olympics. That's crazy.
Oh, you just told me you interviewed Seth Shore. He took the first bet on esports in Nevada.
That's wild.
We weren't on our game back then, so we probably just whiffed on that question. But
it's all right. We can blame Seth. Just it's Seth's fault. He should have brought it up.
But he didn't bring the noise, man. Yeah, that's fascinating. So when you say you have to apply to take bets, like the sports book has to apply with the esports league to kind of allow that action to happen?
The book applies to the gaming control board.
Oh, okay. You got it. Yeah. So it's just more of a normal course regulation.
And then the league or tournament organizer, whoever's organizing that event, has, I think it's 30 days to file a rebuttal or indicate that they don't want wagers taken on that event.
Interesting.
So there is an opportunity for them to say no.
Yeah.
Wow.
What just dumb question, but I'm interested. So when you were talking about some of the team names, you got like the Fire and the Dragons. Like, are there other cool names? Because that's disappointing to me. Like, Dragons make sense. Fine, you could put dragons everywhere. But I'm going, when I would play games online, like the names that people would come up with for themselves were unbelievable. I mean, some of the stuff you see these handles, and I'm like, that's such a cool handle. Like, my name's stupid, right? Like, I have some random name, and I'm like, I wish I was as cool as you thinking about my name.
Mike Kiske, all one word.
Yeah. Just Kiske. Just Kiske. It's like that's so unoriginal.
1985.
But like, you go back to hackers, right? And you're like, it's Crash Override and Zero Cool, and you're like, these are cool names. Like, and then you're playing
Overlord with a zero.
Yeah. Then you're just playing for the team called the Fire, and I'm like, God, like spend a little more time thinking about the team name, right? No, I mean maybe they're champs. I don't know, but I'm just like, God. It feels
no, that's a good question. So there is, let's to go back, since you did ask about Las Vegas, we have, I mean, I'll still call it our hometown team is Rogue, Team Rogue. And
Okay.
Team Rogue actually, though, is a huge international presence. They play in the EU
Wow.
LCS, the League of Legends Championship Series. They have Asia Pacific, North America, and EU. Or Americas rather, and EU, and they're really good this year, which is great. And they had a big Las Vegas presence. Actually, I think they applied to get one of the Overwatch League slots, and unfortunately they didn't get it. They were trying to go for like bigger cities, right? As cool as Las Vegas is, we're just we can't compete with like the 11 million people in Greater LA. And
I guess, but I feel like if I'm looking at Mercedes-Benz Arena, only hold or whatever the German arena is now called, well, that's only 20, 30,000. We got venues that can hold that in
we
Vegas. And
totally
then you go,
do.
look at all the hotel rooms you have. I mean,
So
you
my
could fill the
best
city.
guess is that because they were trying to create kind of hometown hubs, they wanted a location that had a population that could
Just
boost
do it
up a
locally.
hometown hub.
Got it, yeah.
Now, obviously, I totally disagree with this decision. I think it was
Yes.
a mistake, a huge
Yeah,
mistake,
exactly.
because,
Go
like you
Reds.
said, this I mean, Las Vegas is primed to be a massive esports hub, and so maybe
Yeah.
we don't have a team, but you know what? That doesn't mean that we can't be the host to the world like we do with
Right.
so many other things.
Talking about you said 3 billion people play video games, and it's just a huge audience. So as we move forward in this esports and kind of merging it with gaming, gambling, rather being able to place wagers, how do you kind of manage that in a responsible way? Because I'm assuming that a large number of that population is people under 21. And so how do you kind of manage that responsibly going forward to show them that, like, hey, this is a fun thing, but you got to responsibly place wagers? Or
Yeah, that's a great question, because this is definitely a space that is one. I mean, look, I talk about a company taking wagers as far back as 2010, but it's still a super nascent space. I mean,
right.
I remember as recently as 2015, 2016, talking about esports and betting at, I think it was a gambling industry conference. It might have been G2E, ICE, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And someone saying, all right, yeah, okay, you're such a nerd. Like, all right, but you're trying to tell you about this thing. Look,
Right.
we'll chat in 5 years, right? It's
Yeah.
to now everybody wants to know about this subject. It's, it's one of the hugest buzzwords that exist, esports, right?
Yeah.
It's an exciting thing. And so this nascency of the field is hugely important here, because we come from the gambling side, and we're at this point, I think, as an industry, pretty well aware of what it means when we talk about responsible gambling and problem gambling and these sorts of aspects. And not everyone is fantastic at getting these sorts of, like, for example, responsible gambling tools into their product, but it's an ongoing process. More people are aware of it, and there are huge changes that have been happening and that I expect to continue happening. When we look at the gaming side of things, it doesn't necessarily move as quickly. Another huge factor on this side is youth. We often talk about, there's huge target audience, right, with the gambling industry. Speaking of buzzwords, is millennials. Everybody wants to get the millennials, right? I'm a millennial and I'm 36 years old, so maybe we should talk about some of the other age groups that a target audience might be. But millennials are a huge part of the gaming and esports audience. We talk about the younger audiences. It really ranges. We go all the way down into teens and even preteens. I mean, when you look at sort of demographic that plays still games like Minecraft and Fortnite, we're even looking at single digit ages here,
Right.
all the way up to people who are, say, in their 40s, 50s, who have this great nostalgic reminder of the King of Kong competitions,
Fistful
right?
of quarters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fistful of quarters. And so it's a huge age range with a sort of targeted space. And so you want to make sure that as you go through this sort of area, you're targeting the right groups and you're providing the right information. The information that's being given to somebody who's my age really is not it can't be delivered in the same way that you deliver information to somebody who's 9, because just developmentally we're different. We comprehend information differently. And I think that the gaming industry also as a whole really struggles to kind of figure out where it exists on a potential harm spectrum, because we know there's tons of benefits from games. I mean, we use games to learn in the classroom setting. We use games to incentivize. We use games in so many different places in our life, and not just video games, right? Just we're gamifying different aspects of what we do.
Sure.
But at the same time, one of the big things that we've learned, especially during COVID, is how, for example, lots of screen time might not be particularly good for
Yeah.
you, or how, just concentrating on one specific activity, whether it's games or work or whatever it is, might be stressful and difficult. And so there are a lot of different addiction issues that might come up here, or general mental health and wellness issues that might come up here. And these have been usually conveyed in a very negative sense. And this is very frustrating for me
Mm.
because I love the games world. I think it's a fascinating place. And I think they really have their guard up against this sort of thing. If we go back, gosh, 4 decades, the games world has been facing backlash or pushback for that long. I mean, almost since the beginning, it's been treated as the product that creates violence in human beings,
yeah.
right? So, like we see quotes in UK Parliament talking about how they proposed a bill. I think it was 1983, talking about how they need to get rid of video games because they're the scourge on society, and their comments even going into the 90s and the 2000s, and even still to today, people claiming that video games cause violence. And for example, with shootings, one of the things that tends to come up in reports is, oh, and he played this whatever video game X number of hours per day.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes even to the point of overlooking the very, very real and serious other mental health issues that this person may have been having, or other environmental factors.
Yeah.
I remember reading about reading an article where they talked about one of these things happening, and they talked about how he played Minecraft a couple hours a day. And then the article didn't even mention the fact that his parents had gotten divorced a few months prior, and that this is a
Yeah, geez.
major
Yeah.
stressful thing
That's
in a
probably
human
more
being's
stressful than the
life,
video
right?
game activity. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't want to say video games perfect, nothing wrong, everything is sunshine and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
daisies. But there's definitely a reason that this world has its guard up. And I think we need to be
Yeah.
mindful of that, because
Agree.
I mean, research shows that there's almost no correlation. And where there is a correlation, it's so small that it doesn't necessarily make a difference.
Right.
And I think that it's a really important factor for us to understand when we want to communicate with the games world, because all the way down to, for example, just introducing a random number generator in a game, that's chance. And like we see gambling all the time.
Yeah.
So if we see chance in a game, we're like, look at that could be gambling.
Yeah,
Whereas
right.
the games industry is like, no, this is RNG, right? Like we're not we're not creating gambling here. What are you talking about? Leave us alone. We're not doing anything wrong. And
Yeah, right.
and so having these conversations really requires serious conversation, because we can't even get to the what's responsible gaming, what's responsible gambling discussion until we're just on the same page to begin with.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier the OWL is what comes to mind, the Overwatch League, right? So that comes through, designed for esports, designed for competition.
Yeah.
Hearing you talk about the fact they're using RNGs in these games in a lot of cases anyway, do you think how far out would you say we are from somebody designing one that's made for gambling? Like that says, you know what, we're not going to message this to the 9-year-olds because that's not right, because it's 21 and up or 18 and up, depending on where you're on the world. But you know what, there is a gambling element, or there could be. Like, do you see those two worlds coming together, or is that just one of
yeah. We've already got it, right?
Oh, okay.
I don't want to go like hail corporate, right, and start naming all these companies. I know I've already named some in the past, right? So there's two that immediately jump to mind, and I know there are others as well, and I'm happy to talk about those too. But I mean, for example, on the G2E floor for the last couple of years, you've probably seen Gameco, for example, has had a first-person shooter out. It went out on the casino floors in Atlantic City. I've seen some of these similar games in Las Vegas. And then Gamblit has like Pac-Man all over the place, and it's like the huge large screen TV of Pac-Man. And they even had, I remember, I was going to say last year, 2019.
Yeah, feels like last
they've
year,
got,
yeah.
Oh gosh,
or 10 years ago.
They've got, the VR game that they have set up as well, which is basically a first-person shooter, but it's a gambling game. They bring chance into that. So these skill-based games they really were the first frontier of video games and gambling.
And do you think that would ever extend to so now we're seeing more and more mobile betting? Like I can say, I'm not in Vegas at the moment, but I could sit in Vegas and bet on my favorite sports team just in my house, right? Do you think that, Gameco first-person shooter, right? I like the idea of it. I don't know if I want to stand inside of, the Mandalay Bay and do it, right? So do you think there's a world where that evolves and you go, well, using a lot of the same foundations we've used for regular sports betting, we can now do kind of esports betting where you're first person shooter, but at your own house. Like you're comfortable doing it, not in the middle of a.
I think a lot of these skill-based games, I mean, many of them are done, at least on-site at casinos, in a terminal that looks and feels like a slot terminal, right? You just think about the actual hardware that it sits in. And that often translates pretty straightforward to, say, a mobile game or a game you can play online. And then when we think about other elements, I mean, we talked about peer-to-peer bets, right? I mean, look, Landon and I could hop into a CSGO game or Counter-Strike Global Offensive game, and I could bet him that I get more kills and pay out from that. So some of the skills, it's not just the player versus the house, it can also be PvP as well.
I always found those interesting in brick and mortar. Betting against my friend on this little terminal, like, we might as well just slap each other in the face, take our $20, put it in our pocket, and go grab a beer together. If it's someone I don't know across the world, it's a little different. It's like, there's less of like a relationship and a connection there. But
well, maybe. I mean, I don't know if you've been in video game chats recently, but there's a lot of trash talk that can go on. So if you're not practicing, then you really should.
I gotta get in. I gotta get into the game.
I mean, we might not be slapping physically, but you bet we are trolling hard.
Your emotions are gonna feel well slapped, I guess, after that.
No, but my point is even like if Mike and I jump on and we play Mario Kart, say there's a pot in the middle and he and I are racing, like there's just no reason that I want to take Mike's money. And for him to say, I mean, we're like good buddy. Mike's like, I'll take your money, buddy.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm pretty sure Mike will take your money. Yeah, that seems like a
fine. Mike and I are as good as friends as we thought. So,
well, if it's a gentleman's wager, I'm not just going to take it out of your pocket. But if you throw it on the table and say you can beat me in Mario Kart, game over.
But in a casino, it's different, right?
Yeah,
and then he's going to be like, Landon owes me 3 pints because he totally lost to me playing Peach.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'll take Mike's money. But in the casino, in brick and mortar, those kind of skill-based games, right? So we put $20 in. The casino's taking, 8% of that or whatever their vig is or their cut. And then Mike and I are exchanging money back and forth, and the casino's taking a little bit of our pot. So to me, I don't love that in the brick and mortar. If it was online, this is just my personal opinion, which nobody cares about that's listening. Just thinking about it in my my crazy world in my head.
Well, I think that makes sense. I mean, given the very digital world that we live in, the P2P vertical is really, it's designed for that online space. So you really can go all over the world to have that interaction.
And I think it would make more sense, Landon, at scale, right? Because like I know the games you're talking about. I don't remember which company it was, but you'll be sitting there basically playing like slapjack. So you're sitting there going, okay, when the pearl comes out, you got to grab it, right? Or something. And you go, okay, but it's you and me. We each bet $5, but the house is going to take $1. So like either way, collectively, we lose $1 every time. So as much as I can win. But if you said, well, wait a minute, you scale that to 20 people and then the house still takes a small percent, you feel a little better about it, right? Because you go, well, I win more. And it's not just me looking at you who loses $1. But yeah, I think the same concept, but to a bigger audience or a bigger pool of competitors. Like I don't know if it's still this way, but when I played Counter-Strike back in high school, where you get dropped off at the internet cafe, you log in, it was like 10v10. So it was like the teams weren't massive, right? So, but it was still like 20 people. And that was okay. Like, I feel like if we had all put $5 in and the house took $5 every round, like you're still going to feel pretty good knowing that you're winning, whatever that is, $95. So, but yeah, but I'd be remiss about one thing. So I can't let this pass. We talked about Mario Kart. Who we playing? Let's say the three of us jump on for a game. Who's picking who? I'll let you guys go first and I'll pick
which Mario Kart.
I would say 64 just because it's probably timeless original. And more people probably relate to it.
64 original.
Old school. So ladies first, or do you want us to go? I don't want to be rude here.
You guys go first. I'm deciding. I think I know who I would pick. Wait, if you guys pick them first, does that mean I don't get to pick them? Because that's how it works in the game, right?
I'll go with that rule. That's why I was offering to go last. Because I have two characters that I always go with.
You're Bowser. There's no way you're not Bowser.
I'd pick Yoshi.
It's not, see, Yoshi's always a good one. So Bowser my spirit animal in the game is Donkey Kong, right? Like I always like being the big monkey, but I very rarely pick him. But I whoever I pick, I know I'll get trash for it. So I just want to see Landon who you pick. So Brett goes first. She's our guest. She's
Yoshi. I pick Yoshi. He's a good pick. Like you mentioned, okay, I don't want to affect Landon's choice here. So you know what? Actually, I'm just going to pick and save my commentary.
After
I pick Yoshi.
You can argue it.
So Yoshi would have been my pick.
Everybody
And usually I default to Mario once Yoshi's picked. And if I'm feeling really fast, then I go princess. So there you go.
Well, it's good to know princess is an option. I recently hooked up to N64 again, so I've been playing with Peach because my daughter watches. So she's like, "We'll play with the girl." I'm like, "Totally, I don't care. I have no problem with that." But I always pick Luigi, and I know that's gonna get me like a weird online hate base, but like it's one of those where I feel like he's in that middle tier. Like he's not the fastest like Yoshi, but he's not the like most stable. I feel like he's got him and Mario get the best of everything. So if Yoshi's off the board, I always go Luigi.
Yeah.
So Brett, you play video games, which is cool, and you get to research it, which is rad. Do you gamble? So this is kind of like our segue into your gambling story. Do you like to gamble? You like to play. You research gaming. Do you play? And if you do, what's a cool story that you have for us?
What's a cool story? So I play poker. I don't get to play as much as I used to, usually just because I'm busy working or playing video games, which is really cool because that's work these days.
Right.
That's great. I want your
But
job.
I really like to play poker. Early in my career, the first sort of gambling entity I wandered into was actually horse racing. I'm from Del Mar in California, and Del Mar is like this tiny little beach city that if you look at it on a map, about 1/4 of all of Del Mar's land space is the Del Mar Fairgrounds, where the Del Mar racetrack sits. And so this was like, when I was younger, really growing up, this was the sort of place where it causes a lot of traffic during the summer, but otherwise it's there, you just drive around it and whatever. And then as I got a little older, I was fascinated by everything that went on there, everything from the fair itself to the different, plant shows and things they would have to the racing. And so I ended up working there different summers in college, and I did my undergrad thesis on predicting the results of horse racing.
Wow.
Don't get too excited. It wasn't very good, which is why I still work as a professor to this day and not retired on a yacht somewhere.
Should have used some bigger words. Okay.
Yacht. Is yacht a good word?
Quick tangent, old school.
Good word.
If you did have a yacht, what would you call it? You have a name I
do know what I would call it. When my grandpa retired, he had a boat named the Sea Lien, sea and then lien, like a lien on property, because he was a lawyer, and my grandmother's name was Celine. So the Sea Lien. So I, in tribute to that, would call her the Sea Lien too.
Beautiful.
That's a great answer.
I love it. Right off the hop. Our favorite people always can answer that right off the jump.
What would you name your yacht? That's like
well, we started off asking
people.
They're
people like,
go, what?
So that's definitely what I would name my yacht. And so
back
that's
to Del Mar.
I did.
Sorry,
I worked in horses. I would get up at like 4 a.m. to watch the horses worked out. I loved this stuff. So this was really my first foray into understanding how gambling could be, one, connected to sport, and then two, just to our lives in general. Otherwise, it hadn't been a huge part of what I did. And then also when I was an undergrad, this was right during the huge poker boom. So I was majoring in statistics, and a friend found out and decided that they would bankroll me, and they did for a little while. And eventually what I did is I had a job. I worked in the math department at Brown University, and I was paid $8 an hour to grade math homeworks. And they would give me the homeworks. Sometimes they give me an answer key. Sometimes I created it myself. For the most part, the answers are in the back of the book, if you remember being an undergrad. And for those of you who are undergrads listening, the answers are usually in the back of the book. And that's, so I was paid $8 an hour. And then I made that into my own poker bankroll, and it worked out pretty well. So
that's awesome.
That's sort of my general gambling experience. Yeah.
Wow. Any big poker wins? Did you ever take down a pot and like stare somebody down, or like, or is it pretty just?
Actually, early on in my poker playing career, I was told I had to stop staring people down because it was a huge
too
tell.
intimidating.
No, it was a huge tell. And they were like, I always know you're either you have like a totally shit hand, or you have an amazing hand. There's no in between when you're staring people down. And I was like, okay, that's my first psychology in poker. But definitely, that's the biggest pot I ever won.
That's awesome.
I was still, when I was an undergrad, in the poker game I used to play in, and I bluffed 2 guys out of this huge pot one of them actually became a professional poker player. He's been on TV. I don't know if you guys know him, Scott Seaver. Hi, Scott, if you're watching this.
Hey.
I hope you're doing well.
Early
Sucker.
Sucker, right. I bluffed them out. And of course, afterward, right there, I was like, oh, yeah. And so what'd you have? And you're like, oh, I forgot. Right. No,
Deuce
I
7
remember to
offsuit.
this
Yeah,
day exactly
yeah.
what I had. And then the other guy in the pot, I bluffed him out. Right. So I got to take this, I mean, huge at the time pot, it was probably $60 total. And that second guy, actually, we went on a date, and now he is my husband.
That's
Whoa.
awesome. That is amazing. You hit him with the Dr. Death Stare. Is that what sealed the deal?
Oh, I wasn't a doctor then.
Oh, okay. The pre-Dr. Death Stare. That's
yeah,
great. That's so good. Well, congrats. That's a great pot. You took down basically a
story.
day's work when you were making $8 an hour, and
got a husband out of it.
Yeah, right. It's like that
yeah.
awkward joke that people make. Like, it's totally sexist, right? I'm going to college for my BS and my MRS, and I was always like, "Oh, it's the worst joke."
Oh,
and then I
never
ended
heard
up
that.
meeting my future spouse.
You're like, yeah,
That's pretty cool. That's a good story.
Yeah,
That's your
that
biggest
works.
win. You got a husband.
That is definitely
Dang.
my biggest win. I don't think
Nothing
that
bigger than
I
that.
have ever picked up a pot bigger than,
A
lifetime
husband.
mate.
bigger than 6 foot 180 over here. That's pretty much whatever. I don't know how big he is, but yeah, that's it. Oh man.
That is so good.
Awesome. Well, we mentioned earlier you answered the challenge, so thank you for coming on. And I guess as we look forward and had a blast talking to you, who should we challenge in the future? Who would you like to see us talk to coming up?
So I'm going to recommend a friend of mine. He has been a mentor for quite a few years now, Richard Schutz, who has spent many years both as operator, as regulator, as advisor. This is the guy that went in as sort of the fresh corporate face when the mob was getting moved out of Las Vegas and the corporations were coming in. And so when he took over at Stardust after the mob was moved out, he has all sorts of great stories about how he spent like months finding little hidey holes in the desk or in the wall or in the floor. And at one point, I think he was talking about how there was a bathroom connected to the office that he didn't know was there for months because the door was hidden. So he has all these stories going back there. And then he's also worked in the regulatory space for all sorts of stuff. And now he does general advising. The guy has seen everything. He's skeptical of all the interesting things. He'll go on all sorts of great old man rants. And you can tell him I said that. And
hear it.
He'll hear it. But he's really, really interesting guy, has a lot of interesting things to say. And he's been around, seen everything, and had the chance and has the ability, which is really that key thing, to critically think about everything, see the good, see the bad, and everything in between.
That is amazing. A guy named Richard Schutz with mob ties did the predestined.
No mob ties. No mob ties.
Well, mob stories, I should say.
No mob stories.
Sorry, Richard. I didn't mean to slander you there.
Post mob stories. How's that?
Post mob. Yeah, that's it.
The AGA is already looking into that.
I know, right? It's like,
we didn't even hang up yet.
We know this guy. Crud.
Like, what? You can't do it. It's like, what's the hidey hole? That's so good. You're like, oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you. That sounds fascinating.
That's a great shout out.
Brett's open to it in the future. Maybe she can come by since she's in Vegas and do like a live studio interview in the, as we build that, like in the next, we'll have it ready in a month. You don't have to come in a month, but like down the road, because then we can, we can even do something with video games where like maybe we actually do all three play Mario Kart and throw it on.
And I get Yoshi because I already called.
We'll just have to play with the characters we called out. So you're Yoshi.
That would be a fun segment where we play a live version video game. I'm gonna have to practice a little bit, but
I'm gonna have to dig up the SNES.
Better if you don't. Yeah. Ooh, SNES is old school. Yeah, I had that one too, I guess.
I've got the Switch already, but the stupid little controllers are so hard. I got to get that proper.
Yeah.
It almost makes it more challenging.
I think that's a sign that we're getting old, though.
We're not playing with those. We're playing with
sensitive.
Have you seen Mike's hands? We would win no matter what. He wouldn't be able to get his thumb over.
I'd be like, how did I just hit every button at the same time? I don't know what just happened.
He just breaks it. It just goes in. It just turns into dust. He's like, oh, can I go?
Awesome. Well, I'm calling it a date then. We'll figure out how to get a game going in the new studio. So, Brett, this was awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. I should say Dr. Brett, because I don't want to stop the respect there. So appreciate your time. This is great.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the work you're doing for UNLV. We're rebels ourselves, so we're always happy to have you on. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks so much, guys. It was great chatting with you too.